for Saving Our Legacy African Americans for Smoke-Free Safe Places, which many of you know as the Soul Project. Last year, we launched our education series in partnership with community organizations and individuals to really make sure that we are having the community be informed on topics that matter. So we complete surveys at every workshop that we do to really find out what those topics are. And you'll be asked to do that before you leave as well, because we value your feedback. And we know that there are multiple issues that we want to focus on and really make sure our community is formed with making those decisions, as well as fighting for just healthier communities as a whole. As well as them being smoke-free. So today, what our topic is how to fund and manage a nonprofit. But before we dive in, I'd like to just give you a real quick update on some of the things that we're doing with Soul Project's work. It's not advancing. Oh, there we go. Soul Project has been dedicated to creating healthier smoke-free communities in Sacramento. Since 2007, we've successfully reduced tobacco retail licenses in Sacramento and Stockton, so making sure that cigarettes and tobacco products are not as accessible to children. And we've also played a key role in statewide bans on flavored tobacco and vape products, because many times those products have additional chemicals in there that make them increasingly unsafe. And a lot of smoking, you remember, has issue. And so we were effective in talking to the community about about cigarette smoking, but vaping is the new industry way of getting people to inhale things that are damaging to their lungs. So right now, with our Empowering Local Communities campaign, we're really focused on promoting smoke-free multi-unit housing and outdoor areas, because we know that most people are exposed at home. It's the number one place that people are exposed to secondhand smoke. But we always work on getting the community's thoughts and opinions. And in Sacramento County, we found that 75% of residents support smoke-free multi-unit housing. And 80% believe the smoke-free policies actually protect the community's health. In addition, we know that it's easier for people if they never start smoking, which is one of the reasons why working with the community to have a smoke-free home is so important. But once people have started, we know that they can quit, but it's vital for them to have help. Kick It California is proven to help people quit, and they have phone, text, and app programs to help people find the support that they need to quit. So share this with people you know that would like to quit smoking or vaping. The U.S. Surgeon General confirmed for us that there is no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke. It immediately impacts health and contributes to long-term chronic illness like asthma and heart disease, and affects many children and seniors living in multi-unit housing. Multi-unit housing is any place where there's a shared wall. So it could be an apartment, it could be a duplex, it could be a townhome. We know that smoke travels through walls, through open windows, through ventilation systems, and also through
I'm gonna put one more
electrical
tab in, how
systems.
much left of that one?
So one of the things we want to do tonight is show you how um, not having any smoke-free ordinances in the Sacramento County is affecting some of our local residents.
Very related and non-erosive girth. Voquezna is the first and only empty
Um,
treatment of
looks like we need to
exclusive
click
esophagitis
on mute,
for girth. Ooh la la. 93% of
so if
adults
you all can
were healed.
mute yourselves, that would work as well.
79% stayed healed. Plus, Voquezna can provide heartburn-free days and nights.
Sandra,
Serious stomach
no, that's not you, Sandra. I'm not sure who that is.
or while on rilpivirine. Serious allergic reactions include trouble breathing, rash, itching, and swelling of face, lips, tongue,
We
and
do
It's
have
Nikki.
someone. Okay.
All right, so I need to get to this video.
I'm Brenda, and I live in Sacramento. I've been in Sacramento for over 20 years, and I would love to live in a smoke-free environment.
I'm Therese, and I've lived in Sacramento all my life, and living in a smoke-free environment is my goal.
Another neighbor that lives in the back of me. These are two-story townhomes, by the way. She lives in the back of me. She smokes in her bathroom with her daughter, and they blow the smoke up through the exhaust fan, which travels through the vents and everything, and it comes down into my downstairs bathroom. I have to put a towel under my bathroom door down there to keep the smell from coming out of that bathroom into my living room. So that bathroom is shut off basically.
It's been really just trying on my mental state because now I have to up my breathing treatments because my asthma has gotten a little bit worse. It went from just the basic inhaler to now I'm on steroids, both pills and the steroid inhaler. And then, like I said, the breathing treatments as well. Just please be considerate of your neighbors and anyone that has asthma. It's really rough out there for us. And we all want to strive towards a smoke-free living environment so we can live comfortably and happily.
All right, so you can see that sometimes there are unintentional consequences. We pretty much know that most people are not smoking with the intention of harming their neighbors, but it can create significant problems in our neighborhoods when we have multiple people who are smoking. So as I mentioned earlier, there is no safe level um, exposure. But everyone deserves to breathe smoke-free air. Smoke-free policies improve air quality and health for everyone, and they increase our safety from fires, and they also save money. So I invite you to join us in promoting smoke-free communities. There's something each of us can do to support clean air and smoke-free futures. You can make your own home smoke-free. You can speak up for smoke-free housing and public spaces by talking with property managers and public officials. You can educate your networks about the dangers of smoking and vaping, and many other things. I invite you to visit soulproject.com or contact us at info@thesoulproject.com for reasons and other actions that you can take. And without further ado, we are going to launch into our How to Fund and Manage a Nonprofit workshop. Our first speaker for this evening is Shonda Moore, founder of We Brand You Social. Shonda is a marketing and communication strategist with over 15 years experience. She is the founder of We Brand You Social, a branding and social media agency focused on pre-K through 12 schools. Shonda helps schools grow enrollment and connect with families through powerful strategies and messaging. So thank you for being with us tonight, Shonda, and I'm going to turn the screen over to you.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be here in this conversation. We're talking about structuring a nonprofit, your legal, tax, and organizational essentials. And I wanted to go through what you will gain to understand by the end of the session with me this evening. One is what makes a nonprofit and whether your idea qualifies. Which legal structure is right for you, a 501c3 or a 501c3, a C4, how to properly set up your nonprofit, including key documents that you'll need and filings, how to apply for your 501c3 and maintain the status, the ongoing tax and legal requirements that protect your nonprofit from penalties, what your board is responsible for and how to keep them accountable, and then the real benefits of becoming a nonprofit, including access to funding, liability, protection, and public trust, which I'm not going to go too deep on that subject because my colleague Azizza will be covering that in detail. You could go to the next slide. They shared a little bit about me already, but I've been working in the nonprofit and government sector for the entirety of my career. I have a master's degree in management and public administration and a bachelor's degree in mass communications. And I launched We Brand You Social in 2024, where we help mission-driven nonprofit organizations, also schools and education-related businesses build their brands so that it reflects who they are and so that they're able to connect with the people that they serve. And I'm really drawn to this topic because I've always been centered around people and conversations that have to do with substance and purpose, and that's what nonprofit work is all about. And so I'll be talking to you about building the heartbeat and the strength of the foundation of your work. So laying the foundation is part one. You could go to the next slide for me. So what is a nonprofit really? A nonprofit is an organization that exists to serve people. It is important to know that a nonprofit can have founders, but not owners. A nonprofit is publicly owned. So it's the money that is being generated by a nonprofit is not going to private owners, but that doesn't mean that a nonprofit can't make money. You absolutely can generate revenue. The difference is that the money that you generate is going back to your programs, your operations, your impact, and not in someone else's pocket. Generate revenue in your nonprofit organization, but it can't go into anyone's pockets. It needs to go into serving the organization. So before anything else, ask yourself, who is it that I want to serve? And if the answer is your community, if you want to serve students, if you want to serve your neighborhood, then you're probably leaning into a nonprofit organization. So what qualifies you as a nonprofit organization? The IRS doesn't approve every idea, and that's one that is really essential to understand. So your mission has to fit in with how the IRS breaks down a nonprofit. It needs to be charitable, educational, religious, scientific, or literary. And if you're focused on improving lives, educating people, providing access to something that's important, that's probably when you're on the right track of being a nonprofit organization. But it's important that you are clear in that because it can't just serve a small group of people. It has to be a public benefit. And you could go to the next slide. So when we're thinking about choosing your structure, you have two structures for a nonprofit organization, a 501c3, and these are charitable. That means that anybody who donates to your organization could get a tax write-off, and you could apply for mini grants. And then there's a 501c4, and these are social welfare organizations. They're great for organizing and advocacy, but the donations are not tax deductible. So it really depends on what kind of work you're doing. And if you're mentoring someone, if you're a program that is going to be supporting students through field trips, then that's probably a 501c3. If you're a grassroots organization and you want to focus on pushing policy change, then that's probably going to be a 501c4. We can advance to the next. So part two is keeping it legit. You could go ahead to the next one. So these are, I broke them down in 5 steps, but it actually ends up probably being about 8 or 9 steps, and we'll get to them in the next slide in just a moment. But starting your nonprofit, it takes real work. And you do want to have a little bit of money in your bank account because it does cost a little bit of change to get a nonprofit going. One, you need to file your articles of incorporation, and you'll do that through the California's Secretary of State if you're in the state of California. If you're not, then you'll look up the requirements for your state. but you want to set up your corporation and it is broken down into several parts. Typically for a 501c3, you're going to be a public benefit corporation. But then there's also other types. So there's a mutual benefit corporation, which are for memberships and associations. Those are not eligible for 501c3. So it's really essential how you set up your articles of incorporation on the state side. That's going to influence the approval on the IRS side. Religious corporations, if it's a faith-based or a church, and some of those are 501c3s. Common interest, that's like a HOA, and then foreign nonprofit, those are for global and out-of-state nonprofit organizations. And the cost to do that through the California State Attorney Secretary is $30. You want to write your bylaws. It's the governing rule for your nonprofit. It tells us how your nonprofit is going to function, how you're going to make decisions, and how leadership is going to be maintained when there's change that occurs. And then you want to form your board. You can form your board either at the same time of starting your bylaws or after, but most of the time it's a good train of thought to form your board and your bylaws at the same time so that the new board could be participatory in helping you develop those bylaws. In California, you're required to have a minimum of 3 board members. I always recommend having 5 to 7 board members. You want to keep it at an odd number just in case there's votes that need to happen. And then they cannot be people that are related to you. And I always suggest having professionals on your board. You want to have people who are mission aligned, but you also need to keep in mind that your nonprofit is a corporation. This is a business. So if you can have a lawyer on your board, if you could have a marketer on your board, if you could, whoever it is that has that leadership mindset, that business-oriented mindset to help you drive decisions, are who you want to choose for your board. You also need to apply for an EIN, and that is free for you to do on the IRS's website. And this will help you when you're going to set up your bank account, applying for your actual 501c3 status, as well as when you're hiring people. And then number 5 is filing a statement of information. That's Form SI-100 with the California Secretary of State, and the fee for that is $20. And then you need to do that 90 days after becoming incorporated. So it's something that you need to do, and then you update it biannually. Could go to the next slide. So getting your nonprofit, you're going to file your paperwork with the IRS for tax exempt status, and you're going to use Form 1023. 1023 is a comprehensive form. The fee for that is $600, or you could use the simplified form, which is 1023EZ, and the fee for that is $275. In these forms, either one, you're going to share your mission, you're going to talk about your programs, you're going to go over who your board of directors are and provide that information. And then you'll also talk about how you're going to bring in money, how you're going to use money, and the IRS will use that to determine if you are a 501c3 charitable organization, if your work and mission align, and if it's a public benefit, to give you a determination letter. So once you're approved, they'll send you that letter, and that's your green light to then do step number 6, which is register with the California Attorney General's office as a charitable trust, and that fee is $25. This is required that you do it within 30 days of getting your letter. So you want to make sure that you have a checklist handy so that you could get all these things done, because this is going to make or break your status. And then you'll also apply for California state tax exemption using Form 3500A through the State Franchise Tax Board, and that fee is $25. And so lastly, depending on your programs, there might be both local and city permits that you'll need to apply for, and I didn't break those prices down because they'll vary. Going to the next one. So staying compliant. You need to make sure that you file your taxes. And yes, nonprofit organizations do need to file their taxes annually. So you want to do that. It's non-negotiable. That's the way that you are going to stay compliant. And you do that using Form 990, 990EZ, or 990N. And the N is really like if your nonprofit didn't make much money, you just need to submit a form. And if you miss 3 of those in a row, then you will automatically lose your nonprofit status. And you don't want to do that because it's not going to be easy to recover your nonprofit status and to get it back, nor is it going to be cheap. You also want to make sure that you file your state tax filing, which is done every 2 years, and that's by completing Form SI 100, and the fee for that is $20. It's essential that you maintain good bookkeeping and conduct an annual, if you can conduct an annual audit so that you maintain financial transparency. And additionally, you want to come up with internal control systems so that you can safeguard any of your assets that your nonprofit may have as time evolves. You could go to the next slide. Board governance, yes, the board has responsibilities and it is a legal one. I always suggest that nonprofit organizations do good diligence by getting liability protection insurance for their board, because although minimally their assets could be at risk if things were to tumble within your nonprofit organization. But their real duties are to make sure that they are showing care for informed decisions that your nonprofit is going to make, that they're showing loyalty. So you want to have a conflict of interest document set up or a policy put in place, and that they're following the mission and that they're in obedience with the law. And they are, essentially the board that you elect or select, they are your boss. Those are the people that you are reporting to. They're not there to make day-to-day decisions, operating decisions, but they are there to ensure that the nonprofit is running smoothly and within the law. You could go to the next one. Part 3 is power and purpose. So next slide, why it's worth it. The good part is that your nonprofit is structured and you are able to apply for grants. You're able to build trust in the community and create a system for creating donations. You have a board and a team that are legally protected, and you're seen as a legitimate entity within the eyes of your community. So your structure doesn't replace the passion though, right? So it just makes the passion sustainable. So it helps to build something that lasts, that is long lasting, that the community can benefit from. And final takeaways are, if you don't take away anything today, make sure that you have a clear mission, that you set up the legal foundation and the tax foundation properly within your nonprofit organization so that you can actually get that 501c3 status, that you keep your paperwork tight, that you build a board, and that you lead with purpose and integrity. Because when your structure is right, you'll have the freedom to focus on what really matters in your community. And there's a wealth of opportunities for you to delve into, from fundraising, crowd fundraising on Facebook. Also, there's Google Grants. So there's a lot of things that are free, that are not real money for you, but that are free tools for you to access to get your nonprofit's visibility. The next slide, I created a citation page, and I'm sure that they'll be sharing these slide decks with you so that you can have reference points, do your research. There's a lot of information out there. And the last slide, you could connect with me. I love connecting with you. You have access to my website, our telephone number, my email address, as well as ways to find us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram at We Brand You Social. And I am so happy to be here with you all, and I'm open for questions.
I have one question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So if I want to become an access point nonprofit, what would be the best form to use to get started?
I'm not really familiar. So can you tell me a little bit more about Access Point?
So the access points are the ones that they do rapid rehousing, flex funding, things like that. You can
Yeah.
they enter people to continuum of care systems and things like that.
It's probably going to be a good idea for you to be a public benefit organization and apply for a 501c3 status. Because when you think about it, 501c3 is anything that is charitable, and 501c4 is anything that is going to be with change making, organizing, advocacy.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Do we have any other questions for Shonda? You can either unmute yourself and come online and ask your questions, or you can put your questions in the chat.
I got a question. The 990N form, that's to keep it compliant. So that form, what's the I heard you say it was $200 some to file that form. What was that right?
So the $275 is to apply for the 1023 EZ to get your 501c3 nonprofit status. Once
Okay.
you have your status, you're going to be filing your taxes annually, and your nonprofit calendar could be structured in a fiscal calendar, which could be July 1 through June 30th, or it could be a calendar year. However you have it structured, but you'll file your taxes according to either a fiscal or a calendar year. And the 990N form is if you did not make any money or you made a very small amount of money. It's a short form just to keep you compliant.
Okay. Okay. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Shonda, I have a question. Is the fundraising part of your board just the responsibility of the executive director, or is the board involved in that as well? Can they be?
That's a really good question. So you can structure in your bylaws how you want your board to function. It's good to have a working board, and also a fundraising board. So some nonprofit organizations have a minimum, a dollar amount that their board needs to pay into the nonprofit annually. It could be any dollar amount that you so choose, and that will help with fundraising. But for the most part, when it comes to building the actual funds of the organization, that is going to be the responsibility of the executive director and the nonprofit team. But your board members can help. They could write letters, they could use their influence within the community, they could connect you with funders. So that's why choosing the right people to be on your board is so important, because you want to make sure that you have a board who is notable, who has a reputation, who is able to help you build this organization. But that's a good question.
So there is a question in the chat. It is a very good question, and it talks about who should be on your board, specifically with when you talk about relatives. That was asked by Carlita Ferguson.
Well, you can't have any direct relatives on your board. That's the requirement of the state of California. You want to make sure that you have a diverse board. And I usually say, like, if it's a education-based nonprofit organization, for example, having a teacher or an educator, one or two of those people on your board, having somebody who has marketing experience could be a good person to have on your board. Having a CPA on your board, because you are going to have a treasurer responsibility as a part of the the required participants on your board. So having people that have an accounting background could be a good person to have on your board. There's no real formula to who should be on your board, but I just say that it's a best practice to have professional-based people on your board, because you are running a corporation, you are running a business, and you need to be able to rely on your board to help you move your mission forward.
I got a question. Are there any companies that manage?
I'm gonna ask you to pause for a minute,
Okay.
because we do have another presenter who has a lot of experience. I think she may have some contributions to this conversation. So I want to make sure that we get to that presentation. But thank you very much, Shonda, for your presentation. Hope you will be here with us to the end, and we'll have more time for Q&A at the end as well. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Our next speaker is Azizza Goines. Azizza is the president and CEO of the Capital Black Chamber of Commerce and executive director of its foundation. With over 30 years in association management and leadership roles in health and youth services, Azizza brings deep expertise in fund development, community relations, and strategic planning. And so I have opened it up so Sandra, you can share her presentation, and we will give the stage to Azizza Goines. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be able to share some of the information that I've garnered over the years. I've been doing this for a long time. Shonda, that was an excellent presentation. Reminded me of some things that I'd forgotten over the years that I have to do and that I do get done. But it's really good when people are just beginning to put their organizations together, that they understand the importance of compliance. So thank you for all of that information that you shared. As the CEO of the Capital Black Chamber of Commerce, we were once called the Sacramento Black Chamber. We changed our name the beginning of the year because we're doing work statewide now. There are lots of chambers, Black chambers in particular, up and down the state of California, who need exactly what we're doing here today, needing to understand how their chambers should run. Chambers of commerce are a little bit different. They are nonprofit organizations, but their IRS status is a 501c6. And most of what the C6s do is a lot of advocacy work. We spend a lot of time at the Capitol. It's different from a C4. There's quite a little bit of a nuance between a C4 and a C6. So we do a lot of advocacy work, but we also need to raise funds. And you can't, as Shonda told you earlier, we can't make money for our programming through a C6. So most chambers of commerce have a dual role. So I am the president and CEO of the Capital Black Chamber of Commerce, but I'm also the executive director for the Capital Black Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And that's where all of our programming is. Most of our events run through there, because that way you can file for funding. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what funding strategies are. We're going to talk about grants. We're going to talk about other avenues for fundraising. And my friend and colleague, Sandra, is doing the slides for me. This next slide tells you a little bit about who I am and what I do. I also have a consulting firm, ADG Consulting. And I told you about my roles as the president and executive director for the Capital Black Chamber of Commerce. I've been with the Chamber for going on 19 years now, and the Chamber is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. So almost half of the time of the Chamber's life, I've been with the Chamber. I sit on a couple of boards, but I don't sit on many boards, because there's also a fine line between fundraising and executive directors and president and CEOs of almost any organization, whether it's a nonprofit organization or for-profit. Our main role is to raise funds. So we're just kind of glorified fundraisers. That's what we do for a living. Sitting on boards, on others' boards, it's almost kind of a conflict of interest to raise money for another organization when you're raising money for your own. So I don't sit on many boards for that particular reason. But I do sit on a couple. The Steinberg Institute, I just termed off of that board in December of this past year, and it's a mental health organization. And Breathe California fits right in with the Soul Project. I hope you guys are working together often because you're both doing really great work. Next slide, please. And Shonda touched on this. Funding fuels your mission. It's very, very important that you understand what your mission is, because it will keep you on track for the funding that you're raising. And it will also show you the direction that you need to take. You can't just decide that you're going to have a mission statement, but not pay attention to it, because your funders are going to look at you a little differently if you're not raising money that's aligned with your mission. So make sure that that mission becomes a part of your organization. It becomes part of the culture of your organization, so that when you're raising funding, everybody knows what you're raising funding for. Next slide, please. Here's a good example. We took a look at the Soul Project's, excuse me, allergies. Took a look at their mission and their goals. And as Valerie told you earlier, that the Soul Project advocates for healthy, smoke-free communities for African Americans and other populations who suffer disproportionately as a result of social conditions and tobacco use. It is one sentence, just a few words, and that's what they live by. You don't want to veer away from that, because once you start going away from your mission statement, you're running down a rabbit hole, and you're not going to be really good at anything that you're doing if you're not following your mission. I remember when I started doing this kind of work, and I'm so mission driven wherever I'm working, and I've run several nonprofits here in the Sacramento region and around the country. But I always stick to the mission. And so when people call me and they're looking for funding or they're looking for something, if it doesn't align with my mission, I have to say no, because it'll take away from the work that my board of directors and I have determined are the needs of the organization. Next slide, please. Day-to-day nonprofit operations. This is where the rubber meets the road. You want to be effective in your team leadership. If you're able to have volunteer and staff management strategies, that's a really good thing for you to do. I don't know how many of you already are running nonprofits or if you're starting nonprofits. There's a difference between the two. If you're a startup, it's a little bit more difficult. As Shonda was telling you, that you've got to be compliant with your state and with the federal laws that really operate on your behalf. But once you start that process, you're probably going to be a volunteer organization for a while. And the reason is because it's very difficult to raise money in a startup. And she also mentioned to you that it's important that you have a little bit of money in the bank, because it's going to be a while before funders are going to take you seriously. If you're here in the Sacramento region, you're probably not going to believe this, but there are at least 10 to 15,000 nonprofit organizations here. And the Sacramento region is a 6-county area with a very, very low amount of corporate sponsorship available to us. And so sometimes if we're not working collectively, you're like crabs in a barrel. Everybody's going after those same dollars. And so you wind up being a volunteer organization. I really encourage nonprofit organizations to find out who else is doing the kind of work, who is aligned with you in this Sacramento region that you can either work with or collaborate with before you start building your own, because it's very, very difficult in this area to raise money. It's not impossible, but you're going to run into some issues with some of the funders until you have proven yourself that you are going to be around and that your organization is sustainable. When I took over with the chamber many years ago, I had to go inward for a few years. It had been a volunteer organization up until that point. And when looking for funding, they wanted to know who had funded us in the past, how much money we had been given, Why were we not as sustainable as we should have been in the number of years that we had been in existence? And it took me a good 3 years to convince our funders that we were going to be here to stay. It may take you that long to raise funding if you're a startup organization. I absolutely agree with you, Valerie. Collective work and collaboration are key to raising funds in any area, but especially here where we live because there are so many of us. Financial transparency and accountability, and Shonda touched on this as well. It's essential. People should be able to come in, your community should be able to come in and look at your books at any time and see that the money that you're raising is going back into the organization and that you have really deserved to have that nonprofit status. Keep your organization's files intact. It's essential because they are public documents. Your minutes for your meetings are public documents, and you want to have them accessible to anybody else that needs them. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the current landscape and the challenges that we're facing. And I think probably many of you already have seen some of this happening with our current administration, and that the funding from the top level, from the government, is has very limited funding streams right now. It changes, and it also changes in the private sector. In the private sector, many of the foundations that support us, they change their initiatives every 3 to 5 to 10 years. One of the biggest that we've had in this community for the last 10 years are sustainable communities through the California Endowment. It's ending. It's been 10 years, and it's ending the end of this month, I believe, after 10 years. So whatever funding we were getting through that source will be gone. And if it's a nonprofit that was depending on that funding source for the last 10 years, I hope that they were looking ahead and looking where other funding mechanisms might be so that they can continue the great work that the organizations have been doing under the California Endowment for the last 10 years. Donor fatigue is real, and particularly during the times when there are, we're looking at, what am I trying to tell you? When we're looking at ways in which to raise money for elected officials, we've just gotten over a cycle. We're getting ready to go into another cycle for elected officials, not only locally, but statewide and federal again. So people get tired of giving. They just get tired of it. I know that there are probably many of you, I'm certainly one of them, and I'm a big giver. But after a while, it's like, I have no more to give. You know, I've run out of gas. I'm sure I'm not the only one in that situation. So donor fatigue is real, and competitive grant environment is another way in which we have to look. But as I was mentioning to you earlier, the grant environment changes. You have to do a lot of homework before you start looking at grants to make sure that you're aligned with their missions before you start asking for funding. Next slide. Where and how to find grants. They're all over. But what I would suggest at this point is that you're looking at foundation grants, because the government grants at this point, we don't know whether they're here or whether they're not. We just don't know what's going on with the federal. There is some funding available on a statewide level, but you have to remember that the state gets funding from the federal government. So if the federal government is not giving money to the state, then we're still in trouble. Is somebody's, I can't see who's online, but I'm getting a little feedback. So I would absolutely tell you to look at foundation grants to begin with. The foundations have a little bit more leeway, but also remember that in the state of California, what we're also finding out right now, because of those horrendous fires that were down in Southern California, that the foundation grants are really tough to get right at this particular time, because there's a lot of money being put back into those communities down in Southern California that burned. so tragically not long ago. But utilize grant databases. They're all over. There are some resources here in the Sacramento region that you can go to look at and do your homework before you start doing your writing. Find out, again, who is aligned with your mission, who is likely to take a look at your grant. Find out what their needs are. Find out how much they want you to write. Some people only want a 2-page or 3-page grant proposal from you. They don't want a book. They don't have time to read them. And the more you give them, the less likely they are to fund you. So do all of that homework beforehand before you start writing and asking for funding. We get letters all the time from churches even, or church programs looking for funding from the chamber, but there's nothing we can do. It doesn't fall within our mission. And so when you're doing that and you're getting a lot of rejections, it kind of weighs on you a little bit because you didn't do your homework beforehand to find out who might possibly fund you. Understand the eligibility criteria and the deadlines. They're really very strict with the deadlines. You've got to be able to, Grant Watch is good. I do like that one, Shonda, a lot. You can sign up for that and get that one. Some of it's free of charge. But understand the criteria, what they're looking for before you start writing. Make sure that you meet those deadlines because they're not going to look at them if you file after the deadline is open, has closed. Next slide. So there are key components to grant writing. The very first thing that people are going to look for is what your need is. You want to lead with what the need is for your organization. How can you prove that there's a need for it? You have your statistics. Have you looked up the statistics? Have you looked up who else in the area is doing the same or similar work that you're doing? Is there somebody else that you're collaborating with? Funders really like to see collaboration, and they don't want to see collaboration just because you've got somebody else's organization's name in your proposal. They want to know that you're really actually working together and not just splitting costs. You must have a very compelling narrative. Learn your story, tell your story, and tell it succinctly, but tell the whole story of why you believe in this organization and why you think that this particular organization needs to be funded. And again, you're talking about funder priority alignment, making sure that your organization is aligned with whomever you're looking for those funding sources to be coming from. So the common mistakes are made, and I mentioned one earlier, is that you're asking for funding from an organization that doesn't fund what you're doing. That's one of the most common mistakes that we see. And so you want to be sure that you are in alignment with whomever you're funding. The other thing is, once you're turned down, you can keep shopping that grant proposal. Don't stop because somebody turned you down. You use that proposal, just do a little bit more homework and find out who you're in alignment with and shop that proposal. If it's a good proposal. The other common mistake that many people make is that they don't go back to the funder and ask them, what could they have done differently? What could they have said differently? They'll be happy to tell you. They'll be happy to guide you and tell you where your strengths were and where your weaknesses were. And it will help you really either rewrite the proposal or give you an opportunity to shop that proposal in another place at another time. Best practices, tailored grant applications. That is so key. Make sure that you're not, as I said earlier, you're not writing a book. You're not telling the whole story in one grant proposal. Be sure to follow up. If your proposal is not accepted, follow up. And the one thing that I really want to express to you is how important relationship building is. Even before you start writing to some of these folks for funding opportunities, get to know the organization, get to know who these people are. Some people can have the ability to not have to go to a board to determine whether they're going to give you funding or not. They can do it on their own if it's a certain amount of money. But if you haven't built a relationship with them, the chances of you being funded are very slim. So put yourself in positions where these funders are. Go to networking opportunities. Go to these mixers that the chambers of commerce and all of these other organizations are putting on so that you can meet your funders or potential funders. But building relationships is essential. When they don't know who you are, they're going to be a little bit skeptical about giving you money. And handling rejection, the best way to handle it is to ask, as I mentioned earlier, ask what happened? Why were we rejected? What can I do better? What can we say that in a different way? There are key words even that some people are looking for when they're trying to determine who they're going to fund. Building relationships is absolutely important to do that. And handle the rejection, thank them for it, tell them you'll probably be back, and ask them if it's okay if you contact them at a later date and ask them for some other keys that might be helpful in your grant writing. I always suggest to you, though, that if you're not a grant writer, find one. They're not always inexpensive, but you've got to spend money to make money. You have to keep that in mind. If you're not a grant writer, chances are you may not for a while until you get the swing of things be funded. So find someone who can help you to build those relationships and find someone that can help write those proposals for you. Why fund development matters, I think you all know. I mean, we can't live without it. We need to know where the funds are. Most banks have foundations. Hospitals have foundations. Most corporations have a foundation. They have a 501c3. And one of the things I'll tell you, when I first started writing many years ago, I was funded by a bank, and I wrote the grant through our 501c3. They funded me, and I took the check and put it in the account of the 501c6. And they called me and said, we can't fund you for the next 2 years. I put the money in the wrong account. So you've got to be very, very careful about who's funding you and what their expectations are of you with the money that they're giving you. By me putting that money in a 501c6, it meant that they couldn't write it off as a tax write-off, because you can't write off for taxes in a 501c6, but you can in a 501c3. So be very careful about where you're placing the money and what you're doing with that money. Now, the money was going into program anyway, but again, they couldn't write it off. So be careful about that. Here are some development strategies that we've put together for you. And if anybody's interested in these slides, I'll be happy to share them with you. But there are individual givings. You can do annual appeals, just like the one coming up on May 1st, the big day of giving. Donor engagement. Once you start having individuals or donors that are giving to you on a regular basis, you want to keep those relationships going. You want to become good stewards to your people that are giving you funding. You want to call them on occasion. You want to write to them. You want to thank them. You want to contact them to see if there's anything that they need that you might be able to give to them. Build those relationships. It is essential that you keep your donors engaged and keep them happy. We talked a little bit about grants and foundations. Do your targeted research. If you are a grant writer, great. If you're not, I would suggest that you find an organization that will give you some grant writing opportunities. I know SMUD's doing that now. They have a grant writing course. If you want to get into grant writing, find out where you can learn the real way to write grant proposals. Capacity investments. And that's one of the things that you really want to look into, because capacity is one of the things that you need to build your organization. You need staffing, you need volunteers, you need somebody to manage the volunteers. You've got to have someone answering phones and opening mail. Without that, Without that capacity, it really slows the growth and the sustainability of your organization down. And again, building on those funder relationships. Corporate partnerships, we just touched on that a moment ago. They put a sponsorship package together. I'll be happy to share ours with you if you'd like. In-kind donations. Don't think that because people don't have the money that there's nothing that they can't give you to help, particularly around capacity building. Marketing opportunities, use your social media to its fullest extent. Your social media should be the kind of social media that looks into the businesses that you're working with. LinkedIn is one of the best. I'd look at social media in a way that is going to help my small businesses that I'm working for. And I find that LinkedIn is one of the best. Now, that's not to say that the others aren't. That's not to say that Instagram and Facebook aren't good spaces for you. But if it's business related and you're looking for funding, I would look into those marketing opportunities. And again, those relationship building opportunities, take full advantage of them. If you're into events and campaigns, one thing I want to warn you about is events don't really make a lot of money. When you think about the time and the effort that you're putting into building an event, unless it's a signature event that you're doing on a regular basis, you really don't make a lot of money off of events because they're very labor intensive. And by the time you raise money, you're paying your staff for putting the events on and you're already at a loss. Peer-to-peer campaigns, that's where your GoFundMes are. And Giving Day's community engagement, like the Big Day of Giving. All of these are strategies, and I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket. You need to use as many of these opportunities as possible to raise money. Donor stewardship plan. Make a list of your donors and what they do to give. So find a system that you can, a CRM, a customer relations management system, so that you can keep track of who the people are that are giving to you or who the organizations are that are giving to you, so to continue to cultivate those relationships. You can go back to them and solicit for more funding, and also be a good steward to those people that have been giving to you. You want to be able to call them, send them birthday cards, ask them how their children are doing, but don't fake it. I mean, you really got to mean it. All of the organizations that I've worked with, most of my donors have followed me over the 30 years because I've built really good relationships with the folks that I work with. And I think they know my sincerity, and they know and can trust that I am working for those that I'm saying I'm working for. But it takes time. But make those identify who those people are and cultivate those relationships and be a good steward to those donors. Retention and recognition tactics are imperative. It's one of the things that if you're a membership-driven organization, you want to be sure that you're doing things to keep those members happy and keep them engaged and keep them busy. Tell personal touch stories. We don't talk enough about what we do. I don't think many organizations do a really good job of telling their story. Tell your story often. Tell it as many times as you can. Have different sources in how you're telling that story. You might want to have one as an elevator pitch that you can spew off in a few seconds. Make sure that your board of directors knows that and you're all talking in one voice. And keep your engagement consistent and meaningful. Here are some ways to keep involved in your funding opportunities. Give monthly or annually. People like to give at the end of the year. You may notice that. Most people, because that's when their taxes are due. And if they're falling short on their giving, that's a good time for them to give to you. Join event committees. Host what I call fundraisers. That's different from a fundraiser. You're going to do a fundraiser and gather people together and gather some of your potential donors together, networking opportunities, so that you get to know these people that you're going to be working with. Share your mission on social media. and grow trusted networks. Involvement is key. And that's from a high level. There's so much more to learn about giving. But from this high level, Mark, these are some of the things that you want to take into consideration. I'm open for questions.
Wow, Azizza, that was fantastic. Love the breakdown on all the different ways of seeking out grants, sponsorships, and the way to raise money. I did have a question, and I'm not going to be a hog because there are other people. But what are
You can
your
get me
thoughts?
anytime, Plachette, you know that.
What are your thoughts on, because we're actually using AI not to write a whole grant, but what are your thoughts on using AI to assist in grant writing?
I think it's good, but what you need to know is that people give from their hearts, even if it's a foundation of some sort that's you're asking. I would ask for an outline, maybe from AI, but then you write the proposal.
Mm,
I can tell when people send me AI stuff,
mm.
and I'm not opposed to it, but I want to feel that the person that is asking is asking from their heart, not necessarily from AI's heartless words. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was very raw, heartless.
Right. We had a couple of questions that I had kind of cut off earlier, but so Matt Block, if you wanted to ask your question now would be a good time.
I want to know about your what was it? I wrote it down. It was AD, your consulting company.
ADG Consulting. Those are my initials.
So
It's my consulting
tell me
company.
more about that.
So my background is in association management. I tell people all the time that my mom dropped me off at the YMCA when I was 13 and she forgot to pick me up. And so I don't know how to do anything else but nonprofit. I've always worked in nonprofit. I think I stepped
That's right.
outside into the corporate world for maybe 4 years and hated it, and knew that this is where I belonged. I'm a person that does better in service. So ADG is my initials, and I know all things nonprofit.
I get it. So, I mean, we're just starting out. We're probably gonna need your assistance. Is there a fee, or could you send me your the fees to do business with ADG?
Why don't you, my email address is in the chat. Give me a
Okay,
call and let's chat about it.
okay, okay. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Shonda, did you have a comment that you wanted to give on that as well?
Oh yeah, I wanted to say when coming utilizing AI, be very cautious just because it's all about prompting. AI is wonderful, but it's very non-human. And so you want to make sure that you give it the right prompts and that you ask AI to give you a human sounding perspective and you feed it the right information so that it can give you back the right information. And then you really do want to be a little bit careful because there are some funders, like I partner with a statewide organization that does grant making, and they do not like AI whatsoever. So you really want to be mindful about utilizing AI. There is a real AI voice. And one of the things that I like to do is if I was to put something into Gemini, for example, take it into Grammarly and see where it's coming from, or just say plainly that I use AI. So be very careful. And also AI does make mistakes.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. Nikki, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Aziza, when you first started speaking, you talked about that we were in an environment, I don't know exactly how you put it, that had basically a lot of nonprofits and not a lot of corporate sponsorship. That was the gist of what I got from that. Could you go into that a little bit, because we're in an organization that has been trying to raise funds for scholarships, and we're really interested in starting to go for the banking and medical community to see if we can raise scholarship funding from them for kids who have goals and dreams of being doctors and business people and you name it.
Well, what I will tell you, Nikki, is that when your organization is focused on youth,
Mm-hmm.
you have a much better chance of getting some of that funding. But what I was saying is that there isn't a lot of corporate headquarters here, and that's where you find money. So let me give you an example. We have, let's take Wells Fargo Bank. So we have Wells Fargo Bank branches here in our region, but they're not the corporate headquarters. So they're given a finite amount of funding to disperse to nonprofit organizations. But it's not like you're going to the corporate headquarters of Wells Fargo, where there is more funding available. So what I'm saying is that we don't have a lot of corporate headquarters here in the Sacramento region. If you were in the Bay Area or in Los Angeles or down in San Diego, places like that, you have a much better opportunity for being able to get some of the funding that's just not available here in our 6 region area.
Thank you so much, because I wasn't clear about what you meant.
But the other thing is that there is funding available here, but you need to know who those people are. And so you need to be able to build those relationships with those folks in the Wells Fargo banks that are here, or in the PNC banks, or in Dignity Health or Sutter Health. You have to know who those folks are so that you're just not writing blindly.
Thank you. A couple of questions from the chat. Are all nonprofits required to have a board, both a 501c3 and a 501c4?
No, they are required to have a 501c, whether it's a 3 or a 4 or a 3 and a 4. We have a 501c3 and a 501c6. But if you are a charitable organization, you want to be a 501c3. That's the only one you can write the taxes off on.
So does a 501c3 have to have a board?
Yes.
Does a 501c4 have to have a board?
Yes.
Does a 501c6 have to have a board?
Yes. I have 2 boards. And I'll take all your blessings.
Can you talk a little bit about restricted versus unrestricted funding? And then also I would like for you to talk a little bit more. You talked about capacity building funds. How are those funds different?
So capacity building are funds they're kind of like operational. So you can use capacity building grants for payroll, for administrative costs, for things, day-to-day operations. They're hard to come by. They're out there, but they're hard to come by. People like to give to programs. And within the programs that you're trying to get funded, there is usually space for administrative costs. But if you're looking for straight capacity building, you got to do some research to find out who's being able to fund in that regard. Restricted and unrestricted funds, some people want, like I was saying, they want to give to programs. When you're grant writing, you're either writing for a particular program, and any funding that you get for that program has to be spent on that program. You can't take funding from that program to do other things with it, like use it for capacity building. So if you can get unrestricted funds, particularly if you're small and you're just getting started and you really need that, then that's the kind of funding you need to look for.
Arlene, I see you have your hand raised. Would you like to?
Good evening. Thank you so much, both the presenters and for Soul Project. This is very informational and I really appreciate your time. Can either of you speak to C3 and a relationship with a C7 nonprofit, and just kind of working with other C7 organizations and how we just might be able to work together?
Shonda, you want to take that?
I think that I'll let you take it because I don't necessarily know.
The C7?
Yeah, because I'm not really, I'm more C3, C4 and not C6, 7.
I think with any of them, you want to be sure that you're in alignment with what you're working for. So if your missions are in alignment, it doesn't matter whether it's a C3 or a C6 or a C7. It's about your mission. And you want to make sure that your missions are aligned. But you want to have a C3 in there somewhere so that you can get those tax write-offs for your donors' sake. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, I just wondered
Be
if you
mission
had.
driven.
Yeah. I was just wondering if you guys had any experience with working with the C7, and just wanting to, I guess, as a C3, raise monies that can help with the programming for a C7, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. That makes sense. That's what we do. We raise money in our C3 to feed our C6.
Carlita, can you tell us what a C7 is?
It's maybe like a social or what's considered a club organization,
Would it be
like fraternities,
fraternity
sororities,
or sororities?
or yes.
Yes. There, one of the topics that we wanted to touch on was as far as accounting and audits. Are those things required? And when should someone look at having a payroll service or having an accountant that can do their auditing?
So audits aren't necessary until you reach a particular funding threshold. And right now, I think it's around $750,000. So you don't need to have an audit prior to that, but you do need to have financials and you do need to make sure that your books are in order. And I think one of the very first things you want to do is find an accountant to keep your books for you. One of the things that Shonda mentioned that we're not on agreement with this one, but if you're a volunteer organization, I guess it makes sense. But I would at my stage, I don't like putting people on our board because of the work that they do. You know, I don't want an accountant on my board to keep the books for the organization. Because when you get off from work, you want to get off from work. And so, but if you are a volunteer organization and you've not gotten to that point yet where you're going to be able to find somebody to do that kind of work for you, it is important that your accounting is spotless. As I said, your organization is open to the public. It's a public organization and people should be able to come in. You should be as transparent as possible when you're keeping books like that. But so our financials are done by a business firm monthly. My boards get those financials every single month so that they know where we stand financially.
Carlita, is your hand still up from before, or did you have another question?
No, I actually have another question, and maybe I just need to kind of reseat mine. Maybe it was two-part, and I didn't have it all together. But I do want to ask, how can a foundation like ours, along with the C7 that we partner with, maybe this is something that we'd like to do probably with the chamber, work to become a little more visible. I know there have been some networking opportunities with the chamber, but not really much. I'm not going to say that. Just as our organization is a service organization, how can we be a part of some of the things that you do, just to let people know about who we are and what we provide?
Well, we are membership driven, but if you don't join, you're certainly welcome to attend any of the events that we put on. And our events are always listed on our website. And if you want to receive mail from us, you can just give us your email addresses and we'll get you in our database and you'll get mail from us almost daily. There's always events. We're very event driven.
Okay.
Got some events coming up this week. In fact, there's a new member orientation, I think day after tomorrow. I can't keep up with the dates, but we're always, networking is super important. And as Plachette will tell you, Plachette has been following me for years, and I follow her for years, and Valerie. So we're always at each other's events all the time. We partner quite a bit.
Someone had asked in the chat, how did we build relationships? And I was thinking that it's over time. It's one relationship at a time. When you find an opportunity to work together and to continue to build on those relationships over time, it builds that credibility and trust that also leads into your collective success. And Plachette, I do see you, but I did want to ask about evaluation and communicating your success. And I'd like to get input from both Shonda and Azizza on that particular piece.
Well, I'll go ahead and start about communicating your success. As Azizza shared in her presentation, is all about sharing your story. And we can't ever not tell our story enough. And I believe that some of the best ways to tell your story is through social media, because people are following social media. There's multitudes of social media platforms, but the strongest social media platforms that continue to exist are going to be YouTube, if you're wanting to communicate a message via video. Instagram and Facebook are next. Instagram is still really strong. Then we have some of the younger, like Blue Note, we have X, we have TikTok, and some of those are popular. But it doesn't mean that that's where a mission-driven organization needs to be. And so I'm always asking people to ask the question of, what is it that you want to convey and who you want to target? Because more than likely, your target population is going to live somewhere on Instagram. And I would say that, making sure that you keep your materials, your collateral up to date, updating your website. Visibility on your website is essential. People don't always go to a website, but you could definitely drive traffic to your website. So you want to make sure that you have fresh content on your website, that your website really tells a story about who you are. So when a funder or a community representative comes to your website, they'll be able to understand who you are. And I also wanted to give voice to a couple of things that I put in the chat. One is Google. So Google has all kinds of cool tools for nonprofit organizations where you can use their whole entire ecosystem. But then also they have Google Grants, and I mentioned it in my presentation. They give nonprofit organizations $10,000, air quotes, a month in ad spend. And that's really like, you should definitely take advantage of it, because you can use that as in-kind or in-kind donation, whatever contributed revenue to your organization. And that helps you tell your story. That helps you direct people to your website. That helps you get the message out about whatever it is that you want to communicate through Google Ads. And that's $10,000 that is given to you a month for free. The other thing that I wanted to give voice to that I put in the chat is Meta fundraising. They have, Meta is Facebook and Instagram. They do have a fund where they fund nonprofit organizations. They have all kinds of supportive tools where nonprofits could tell their story and raise money. You could have the Meta donate on your profile page. You could drive income through your profile by having small donors as well as major donors through Meta. And I will pass it to Azizza.
So well. What I would add to that, that was just pretty thorough.
Right.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Shonda.
So Plachette and then Carlita.
I know the time is winding down. We didn't get a chance to talk about using fiscal agencies, which could be a little tricky. That came to mind when Carlita was talking about how if you're not able to make money through your current nonprofit, raise funds, then working with a fiscal agency, a trusted fiscal agency. I know our organization had some issues years ago, so you have to be very, very careful, along with what Azizza said with a relationship building, and making sure that's really important. So I'd like your thoughts on that, Azizza and Shonda, about utilizing fiscal agencies.
I think, it's not a long-term, it should not be a long-term situation, but until you are legal with your own nonprofit status, I think that there are some fiscal agents out here that you could do very well with. I think that I would look for fiscal agents that do that, that's part of the programming that they have, that they become fiscal agents for nonprofits that are waiting for their IRS status to be fully engaged. But yeah, do your homework first and make sure that that fiscal agent understands that the funds are restricted to that organization, but also understand that fiscal agents charge you. So you have to be aware of that fact too. It's not a free service.
Plachette, I'm going to have you go into the funding resources document that we have available for everyone.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I want to go ahead and the Soul Project last year decided to put together a funding resources list that would give you a quick access to different funders out there. A lot of some of these funders have been talked about in the presentations that have been made specifically by Aziz. I think Wells Fargo is part of this list. I am going to drop a link in the chat that you can quickly access as well, and you can download this list. But it is a good list to keep handy, and check these different links. Bank of America is on here, Sierra Health Foundation is on here, the Sacramento Regional Foundation is on here. There are several organizations on here. I think Safe Credit Union is on here. So, and most of these places give annually. Now we are in a different climate right now, so with a lot of federal dollars crossing state dollars down to local dollars. So just hoping that these organizations, it's probably going to be slim, I would say slim giving this year. So we're going to have to write much stronger proposals and continue to build those relationships and reach out and make phone calls and so forth. But this is a really good list to keep handy. And I think our organization, we've actually been funded by several years in a row by some of these folks that are listed on this funding resources list.
Right.
One of the key words that you mentioned, Plachette, was phone calls.
We on April 28th from 6 to 7:30, we will do an orientation about No Menthol Sunday. It's something just to encourage people who are currently smoking to get on the journey to quit. And then also, this is just our conclusion for completing our evaluation survey. We really appreciate you spending your time with us this evening, and we look forward to talking to you in the future. We will make the slides available We will do an email out to everyone who has participated today, and we will continue to make sure that you get the information that you need. So if you have some other information or any questions for us, you can reach us at info@thesoulproject.com. Thanks, everybody, for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you. Bye-bye. Have a good evening.